So you can imagine my horror, is a good word for it. I mean, because when I got to Chicago, I'm thinking, why am I even doing this? I'm doing this because I'm going to Chicago because that's where the traders are. That's where the people are who know what they're doing. Correct? And then to get there to find out that that is not the case. That is not the case at all. That there were 40, almost 50 brokers in the office, and none of them knew how to trade. Not only did they not know how to trade, I mean, Merrill Lynch made absolutely no bones about the fact that we were not traders. They spent no money, no time, and completely discouraged us from even learning how to trade. We were salesmen. We were taught how to talk about trading. We were taught how to talk about investments. We were taught how to, it's called dialing for dollars, to get on the phone and get people to open up accounts. And even though this was unspoken, I'd say the underlying philosophy behind the business was, especially in the commodities business, I'm not talking about the equities. I'm not saying that on the equity side of the business that it wasn't more reputable. But this was about as irreputable as it could be. Because the underlying philosophy that we operated from was, all commodity traders are terminal, meaning like they have a terminal illness. It's only a matter of time before they, when I say all commodity traders are terminal, and it is our job as a broker to make them as comfortable as possible until they expire. In other words, to extract as much money out of their account as you could until they're gone. And even to this day, it just blows me away to think that when I went to a 30-day training class in Manhattan, and there were brokers from all over the world, probably about 80 or 90 of us, and the guy and the person that was the head of Merrill Lynch Commodities at the time, his name was John Conheeney, and when he came in to address our class, and to this day I don't know why he did this, but he said hi, and he started out with these words: the average Merrill Lynch customer loses all their money in 6 months. And that was the truth. Commodities, not equities, commodities. And that was the truth. That was about what it was. It took about 6 months for people to lose their account, and you just, like I said, you just go to the next one. So here I left this six-figure income to go to Chicago to learn about this business and this industry, and here I'm in a situation, and it's like, it was, like I said, it was appalling, absolutely appalling. So I thought, well, okay, I'll make friends with people on the floor. They must know what they're doing. The floor traders know what they're doing. Well, I found out that wasn't necessarily the case either. Now, it doesn't mean that the floor traders didn't know how to make money. But and this is, I'm not going to get into this because we don't have time. But even though what you do is called trading, and what they do they call trading, the way and the mindset that you have to make money couldn't be further apart, even though they're both called trading. The typical local, the person who traded for their own account in the pit or in the floor of the exchange, the way they made money, weren't trying to make direction-related decisions. In other words, it wasn't the kind of trading where they would find themselves in winning trades that were going in their favor, but that's not the reason why they put the trade on. And like I said, I'm not going to get into the specifics or dynamics of it because it'd take me too long to explain, and it just isn't necessary for right now. All I'm saying is that it's a completely, as a matter of fact, before I left Chicago and moved to Arizona, the Chicago Mercantile Exchange asked me, and I worked on it for a while, for about 6 months before I left, asked me to put together a program to help floor traders make the transition from the floor to screen-based trading, because it's a huge psychological leap. It really is. It's a huge transition that has to be made. So what I'm saying is that, not knowing that before I got to Chicago, it was like, here I'm in a situation where I really didn't know anybody who really knew how to trade, or at least knew how to trade in the sense of creating that consistency that we're looking for. It doesn't mean that people couldn't make money. People were making money all the time. It's just that, what's the point of making money if you're susceptible to giving it all back? In other words, if this is your equity curve, and then all of a sudden your you're experiencing these huge losses and huge drawdowns, not only is this certainly damaging financially, but it's also damaging emotionally. And it can be very difficult to recover from. These are what I call the boom and busters. Okay, you basically had traders that fall into three categories as far as equity curve is concerned. You've got your consistent winners, the people who have, the traders, you've got your consistent winners. Now it doesn't mean that there aren't drawdowns here, okay? But what do you think these drawdowns would be a reflection of for the consistent winners? Consistent winners take losing trades all the time. But their drawdowns are a reflection of what? Anybody got any ideas?
Good money management skills.
Yeah, money management skills. Capital preservation. Okay, these are two good answers, but not the answer I'm looking for. Their drawdowns are simply a reflection of the normal losses that any trading methodology will incur. There is such a thing as normal losses. You don't have to write this down because we're just starting to scratch the surface. We are going to go into this in far more detail later on. So, I mean, if you guys want to write it down, that's fine, but it really isn't necessary. Okay? Normal losses that any trading methodology will incur. Then you've got people who learn something about how to trade, who acquire a good methodology where it is possible, based on that methodology, to experience a consistent income, but your equity curve might look more like this. Most people who are experiencing the boom and bust cycles, these are the bust cycles, would say that something happened in the market to cause this. What you're going to find out today is that it is not the case. Even though it may seem like it, it is not the case. These are virtually always the result of trading errors, what I call trading errors, which we're going to go into in detail later on. One of the, just for the gentlemen, few people back here that don't have any idea of my background, I'm going to go a little bit further in it, and I'm just going to jump ahead for a second. I ended up being a trading coach, and working with. I was a trading coach for probably about 17 years. I don't really do it much anymore. I just pretty much focus on my own trading, but while I was, especially in the, throughout the 80s and most of the 90s, I worked with a lot of floor traders, and we talk about boom and bust. There was one of the floor traders I worked with was probably one of the 5 biggest bond traders at the Chicago Board of Trade, and when I met him was in around May of 1992. And from January of 92 until the time that I met him in May of 1992, he had around, this is a guy that just traded for himself. He didn't trade for a firm. He just traded his own account on the floor of the Chicago Board of Trade in the bond pit. He had $12 million roll in and out of his account. And he had a particularly bad day, and he ran into somebody who attended one of my workshops and said, hey, you should go see this guy. He called me. We had a few appointments, didn't really go anywhere. And the next thing, about a month later, I get a frantic call from his wife, who I hadn't even met, didn't even know who she was. Got a frantic call from his wife that said, they're going to lose their house if I don't do something with him, okay? he had another real bad day. So anyway, I started working with him in July of 1992. And from July of 1992 until the end of the year, he ended up the year with almost $6 million. Now, that may not seem like a lot considering he had these swings, but he'd never finished a year with more than, I think, around $650,000 or $700,000. So he had just under $6 million. And so then he went on vacation. He happened to take a book with him called The Coming Collapse of the Bond Market. And this would have been in like late December of 1992, early January of 93. And came back. Now, if anybody remembers the bond market back then, it rallied to spectacular heights. But in the meantime, he'd read this, The Coming Collapse of the Bond Market, so he was going into the market every day short, okay? And pissing away this $6 million until he got to the point where he had about 2 of it left. And took him about, I don't know, until maybe mid-February. And he was so exasperated that he said, hey, you know what? I'm willing to do anything. Okay, now keep in mind, I'm willing to do anything. And it wasn't lip service. It was real. It was genuine. It was sincere. And I said, if you're willing to do anything, then here's what you have to do. What I've been working with him, what I noticed is that he was able to stay focused really for not more than about an hour a day. Now, this guy loved trading. I mean, he just loved being in the pit. He just loved every part of it. He just had the hardest time tearing himself away. But if he really wanted to make consistent money, then I felt that an hour a day was about it. Because after an hour a day, his focus would start to diminish, and then he'd also start to get reckless. He was the kind of guy, and this here again, this is very difficult for people to comprehend, but it is the absolute truth. He was the kind of guy where, when I was working with him during that period, in the second half of 1992, where he would have he'd have a $500,000 day winnings. He'd make $500,000, but when he called after he was out of the pit to have his consultation, he'd be real angry with himself, because up to about 5 minutes before the close, he was up $500,000, and then he'd piss away about 175 of it. So it only ended up with $325,000 for the day. Now, this is just like a normal guy like us here in this room with $325,000, and this was not an abnormal day, but he's real angry with himself because he pissed away that 175. And then the next day, he'd do about the same thing. He'd make 400 and piss away maybe 2 at the close. And then the next day, he'd make 350 and then piss away another 150. He's got spectacular wins up until Friday. But this accumulated anger that he was building up throughout the week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, by the time Friday rolled around, he'd lose $1.5 million. And then start the cycle all over again. So now it's like I'm saying, you know what? Especially as a floor trader. As a floor trader, you really have to be focused. When you're trading at the level that he traded at, where you're trading hundreds, if sometimes thousands of contracts, if anybody knows anything about the bond market, we know that one incremental price change in a bond contract is $31.25, okay? You guys with me on this? So this would be a tick. So in other words, if the bonds went one tick up and you're long one contract, you'd make $31.25. If it went down one tick and you were long one contract, you just lost $31.25. He would trade 1,000 contracts at a time. That means one incremental tick price change was $31,000. $31,250. Now, if anybody's ever watched the bonds move, you know that it can move 5, 10, 15 ticks like that. Not only that, there can be what's called price vacuums. Everybody familiar with a price vacuum? You know what I mean by price vacuum? It means that if the bonds are at let's say 106.10. You guys are probably not familiar with bond prices. 106.10, that was the last posted price. That something can happen and you're long. Something can happen where there are no more offers and the next posted price is 106 even. That means the market went down 10 ticks without there being any trades between 10 and even. No trades at all. Which means if you're long, you just lost in that instant $31,000.25 on 1,000 contracts. This is quite common. So you really have to be focused. It would be like when you're trading at this level, I would make an analogy. It's almost like, there's a couple of analogies. One, it's like if you're in an NBA playoff, it's the finals, it's the last game, 7 games, it's 7-game NBA finals, 1 minute left, the score is tied. The coach is going to send somebody in who's really focused. If the coach thinks you're distracted and you're not on your game, you think you're going to get in that game? This is the way to be in these kind of circumstances in the pit. That's the kind of mindset that you had to maintain. Because even if you were distracted and turned away, there could be bids and offers that would have gotten you out of your trade that all of a sudden dry up. Meaning when guys are bidding and offering in the pit, they're using hand signals and they're telling you they want to buy or they want to sell and how many. And there's hundreds of guys all around screaming. Now these bids and offers can dry up because when you make eye contact and you point, you say, okay, we've got a trade, and then you write your trade down on your trading card, or now it's an electronic handheld device. But otherwise, you make a trade, and then you could be out of your trade and take your profits. When these kind of things happen, these price vacuums, you could be in bad shape, and just be a matter of just a momentary look away. The guy that you were going to use to get out of your trade is gone now. He put his hands down. Uh-oh, I'm in trouble. Well, what I found is that he could maintain an ideal mindset for about an hour a day. And so that's what I said. If you're really sincere, if you really want to do anything, you can only trade an hour a day. And he agreed to it. And he said, what hour a day? I said, it really won't matter. And it really didn't. He was convinced initially that what hour he went in would make a big difference. It really didn't make any difference at all. He was so good. As a matter of fact, there were other bond traders that I work with that said that watching him trade would have been the equivalent of like watching Michael Jordan play basketball. He was that good. And so he did. He went in just 1 hour a day. And because he knew that he only had that 1 hour, he was really focused, and he was averaging $175,000 for that one day, or for that on an average for that 1 hour per day. Okay, but that would be an example. He would be an example of an extreme boom and buster. Everybody kind of have that concept down in their brain about boom and busters. Okay, and then what you have is the consistent losers. People whose equity curve looks like that.